Hey guys, what's up? Excoundrel here, and today we're going to be looking at tension bow and bonesaw and the differences between the two. Now, if you don't want to look at my methodology, which is very boring, trust me, if you want to skip the boring part of the video, you'll want to go to around 4 minutes. If you do want to see how I do all my maths and how I work it out, feel free to watch the next 3 minutes of the video. It has my in-depth explanations about the formulas that I use and also the spreadsheet. But if you want to skip it just to get straight to the DPS, please do. The timestamp will be in the description. So before we get into the video, I'm going to show you exactly how I work these kind of maths videos out, and I'll show you exactly how I compare the two types of builds in a situation where I can change the variables and it gives me an output that you guys can understand, and I can put that into a video and it makes a lot of sense. What I've got, I'll start up here, is a breaking point chart. This just shows me the values that I would need to meet here before updating the breaking point values, which I actually need to do manually. I haven't figured out how to do that with a if formula yet. That can get quite complex, and especially for breaking point with so many extra added factors, I'd rather just do it manually for the moment. The rest of it is done automatically. So up here gives me the armour value that I'm concerned with, i.e. the armour that we have to get through to deal damage. And then the rest of this is the values that I'm using to input into my formulas for damage. So I'll explain it from left to right. This is the tension bow sorrow blade breaking point build over here. And you were going to use an arbitrary value of 1 attack per second because we don't know what the attack per second of every hero is, and therefore we're just going to assume 1. Therefore, breaking point gives us 20 attack speed, and that means we get a 1.2 value for our attack speed, which is basically 1.2 value, 1.2 attacks per second, which over 6 seconds gives us around 7 attacks for the tension bow build. And therefore, it means over 6 seconds I get 2 nicely rounded tension bow hits, the first at the first second and the last at when we hit 6 seconds. So, over the course of 7 attacks, this is the projected DPS, or this is estimated because there are decimal places that I'm moving around. The estimated DPS of the tension bow build. What happens is it takes the formula and then inputs it, and basically every time I hit a threshold, I update the breaking point chart to increase the breaking point stacks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sum that, divide it by 6, and that gets our damage per second. Over here on Bonesaw, it's exactly the same, 1.45 attacks per second, so that gives me 9 attacks over 6 seconds. Slightly lower weapon power, not concerned with the on-hit damage of tension bow because we don't have it. And I do exactly the same thing, and therefore I update the breaking point stacks manually, but because we have Bonesaw and we have Bonesaw Shred, which is the shredding of the armor, we then have to concern ourselves with what happens to our armor value when Bonesaw gets a stack on it, and that's every time we hit, we go all the way up to 8 stacks, and that gives us our maximum armor reduction on this last hit right here. And this is taken from this value, and then instead of calculating the armor value from here, it calculates the armor value from over here, and therefore gets our overall DPS. So, bit complicated, but that's exactly how it does it. And this is showing you the two builds at 100 armor, showing you that actually at 100 armor, the two builds have very comparable DPS over the course of 6 seconds, which is very important. For 3 seconds, you'd get a better DPS for tension bow because you need to build those Bonesaw stacks to have the impact. So let's actually get down to the comparisons at different armor values. This is the DPS over 6 seconds. I just explained it before. Obviously, you have more attack speed with the Bonesaw build, so you get a couple more attacks in. It's about 7 attacks compared to 9 attacks over the course of 6 seconds. And at 100 armor, you can see that Bonesaw actually outperforms tension bow by about 18 DPS. Now, less of this at this point in the game will be to do with the armor values. Would be more to do with the fact that the extra attack speed that Bonesaw provides is very good for the likes of tension bow and sorrow blade. And you'll actually find that with this build, that the Bonesaw actually keeps up with tension bow quite nicely, mainly because the attack speed affects the breaking point stacks at especially low armor values more than anything else. So have a look at the DPS over 50 armor then. You can see here tension bow starting to outperform now. The big on-hit effect that you get from tension bow, very, very good, especially in the early game where armor values can be below 50 armor, and it outperforms by about 2 DPS. Not a huge amount, again, they are very similar. A lot of this can be attributed down to the fact that the sorrow blade and the breaking point do the majority of the work for these items at this low armor value, and that the Bonesaw attack speed comes into play, and it's something that people underrate on Bonesaw. Bonesaw has got the attack speed, which does help you, I guess, with you've got a breaking point in your build as well. When we compare to 200 armor, the area where I really expected Bonesaw to accelerate out of control, we actually see that the DPS is started to even out again. You know, it's only about a 4 DPS, 3 DPS difference between these two items. And that's because the 12% PS from Tension Bow gets very good the more weapon power you have. That 12% PS becomes better the more armor the enemy has and the more weapon power you have. So it's actually pretty close between these two items. Bonesaw's supposed to be a late game armor shredder, actually not hugely outperforming Tension Bow over the course of 6 seconds. Let's have a look at 3 seconds though. At 50 armor you can see Tension Bow outperforming by about 13 DPS. At 100 armor, Tension Bow still outperforming by about 13 DPS. And when we get over towards 200 armor, you can probably guess the story. Tension Bow still outperforming by about 11 DPS, still a considerable margin, which is pretty insane over the first 3 seconds. And when you think about it, we need to talk about what constraints these two builds bring to the table as well. It feels like for a 3-item build, it is more cost effective in almost every situation to build a Tension Bow for the similar level of DPS. Tension Bow is about 80% of Bonesaw's value in terms of gold. And then Bonesaw is also less flexible than Tension Bow. To get the maximum efficiency over 6 seconds with that build, that gets you all 8 stacks of the Bonesaw, you have to be hitting the same target for at least 8 basic attacks in a row. And that can be very difficult in a teamfight situation to achieve. So Tension Bow is more flexible, especially as you're dipping and diving out of a fight. You might have points in the fight where you're not actually attacking at all and you're repositioning. And that's where Tension Bow refreshes and becomes more useful. So Bonesaw, very limited in what it can do because it's quite constraining as an item to get the efficiency out of it as well. So Bonesaw gets better the more attack speed you build, specifically because you're going to apply more stacks more quickly. I think that speaks for itself, and therefore the quicker you get to 8 stacks, the more damage you can deal. Tension Bow gets better the more weapon power you build. Now, obviously, both of these weapons are going to get better the more of either stat that you build. Tension Bow does get better with attack speed, and obviously Bonesaw gets better with weapon power as well. But what I'm saying is individually these items benefit Bonesaw more from attack speed and Tension Bow more from weapon power. Tension Bow, for instance, its passive does not get affected by attack speed. Therefore, you need to wait 6 seconds to get that passive up every time. We are starting to see a rise in double weapon power compositions as well, and that is in part due to the fact that Tension Bow is so strong right now, but also in part due to the fact that Bonesaw on a carry that's attack speed dependent, if they shred the armor on the one target that you're focusing, Tension Bow is going to hit harder and you're both going to deal more damage. So Bonesaw is necessary in a double weapon power composition, of which we are seeing more and more of these days. And I'm actually not saying that you couldn't combine Tension Bow and Bonesaw together. For instance, the popular Vox build right now is Poison Shiv, Breaking Point, and Tension Bow. You could add a Bonesaw, arguably, to that mix and become stronger. Then the question lies whether the Tension Bow is better than a Sora Blade, for instance. So it's worth weighing that up when you consider. But I'm not saying that you can't put these two items together. Tension Bow, however, in a 3-item build, is just outperforming Bonesaw as an armor shredder, and therefore it is almost negligible. It's almost pointless, going for a Bonesaw when you're a 3 weapon power item carry. Maybe in 4, but even then, I think it would be close. I hope this has been interesting, guys. I have really enjoyed doing the maths behind it. Again, I wanted to put a video out today because I messed up yesterday's video, so I wanted to put out something extra. If you're interested in the more math stuff, don't feel free to reach out to me. I will happily chat you through it or explain how I did it. The first 3 minutes of this video does have an explanation. Go and take a look at it. I know it's boring, but it is how I do all of my work. I'll see you soon.